world has changed dramatically over the last 20 years. We've changed how we work, how we travel, how we consume content, how we build companies, and how we define success. But one thing has remained surprisingly outdated: the way we think about aging. Somewhere deep down, many of us still carry these invisible timelines in our heads. By this time, you should look a certain way. By this time, you should slow down. Ambition should reduce. Adventure should reduce. Visibility should reduce. And eventually, maybe relevance should reduce as well. And yet, when you actually look around you, the reality is telling a completely different story. People in their 50s are starting businesses. People in their 60s are traveling solo. People in their 70s are learning new skills, finding new purposes, building communities, dating again, diving the oceans, running marathons, mentoring startups, and honestly exhausting the rest of us. So maybe the issue is not aging itself. Maybe the society is still operating with an outdated script. And today's guest, Meenakshi Menon, is someone who's actively rewriting that script. She spent years in leadership, media, sustainability, gender advocacy, and now through Gen S Life, she's helping India rethink what life after 55 can actually look like. So today we're talking about purpose, visibility, and why growing older may actually be one of the most interesting phases of life. Welcome to Hit the Reset, Meenakshi.
Thank you, Malu. It's lovely being here.
You know, I've honestly lost track of the many passions you have and you pursue. And what makes it even more fascinating is how wonderfully diverse they all are. You know, you've built businesses, worked across industries, advocated for gender equality, cared deeply about sustainability, and somewhere in between, you also decide to go diving underwater and then focus on longevity, right? So while most people struggle to update their LinkedIn profile, you seem to keep updating your life constantly. So where does this curiosity and appetite for reinvention come from?
I think it starts with just being curious, okay, and wanting to know more about the world that we live in and understanding that our presence on this planet actually can be treated either as a blessing or a curse. Now, if you treat it as a blessing, then you're trying to make the most of it. And honestly, there is one thing that unites each and every living human being on the planet. And that is that we all have 24 hours to the day. Okay. So whether you're Elon Musk or Mukesh Ambani or Meenakshi Menon, we all have 24 hours to the day. The difference is what we do with those 24 hours. And ultimately for me, that was a realization 40 years ago when I started my life, that it's up to me to decide what I want to do with my life. And in whichever direction I want to go, the choice is entirely mine. Because I have only 24 hours. So that's been an amazing mantra. It served me very well.
It hasn't reduced or gone down even a single bit, I guess. From the time I've known you till today, the curiosity has just grown more and more.
And the interesting thing, Malu, is that the tools have improved. And so with the improved tools, what happens is your curiosity gets assuaged much faster. So earlier, for instance, if one was curious about, let's say, a place or a people or a community, it became very difficult to get that knowledge.
Sure.
Today, it's easier because you can, just go online and the internet, artificial intelligence, there's so much that makes life even more exciting. But the funny thing is some things don't change, okay? And like the narrative, you talked about the narrative, right?
Yeah.
Look, the minute we are born, we start aging. Nobody would want a 2-year-old to stay a 2-year-old for the rest of his or her existence. I mean, what a horrifying thought that is.
Except for the grandparents, I guess. They like to have these little toddlers running around.
No, but for anybody who's been a parent, imagine the nightmare of having a 2-year-old stuck in that situation for the rest of their life, right? Aging is a natural process. And all of us, if we are lucky,
Yeah.
we age.
Yeah.
If we are unlucky, we die,
Yes.
right? So all of us who are alive are actually lucky people, whether it's you or me or your viewers. Every one of us knows somebody who lost their lives when they were young.
True. Yeah.
So it's a natural process. But what do? We take everything natural and we twist it around and literally pummel it out of shape. And the problem with getting me on this topic is I can't stop talking because it's so close to my heart. And the funniest thing is that at age 67, I actually feel even more vital, even more alive than I did in my 40s. And I want for every senior person to understand that life is full of incredible and endless possibilities. Of course, we've got problems. I've got a torn meniscus, but I still did my 5 kilometers walk today because problems are part of existence. But positivity is something we have to cultivate. Passion is something we have to feel. Purpose is what makes us who we are.
Yeah. True. You did make one statement saying there are certain things that don't change, right? So, what is the funniest or a bizarre assumption someone has made about you because of your age?
Oh, that was actually the trigger for my entire journey on this space was because of a simple assumption made by a enthusiastic store clerk
Mm-hmm.
in a shop. So I went in to buy a iPhone, right? And I asked this, my hair that day was like tied up in a bun. I probably looked tired. I was wearing a cotton sari. I carrying a little cloth bag, which is where I always carry my computer and iPad. And so I walk up to this guy walks up to me and says, "Yes, what can I do for you, madam?" And I said, I'm looking for the latest iPhone. And he said, "The latest iPhone, won't that be a little too sophisticated for you? Don't you think Android will be easier?" And I was offended. I showed him my iWatch and I showed him my iPad and I was really offended. But more than anything else, finally I bought the iPhone and left that store. What I realized is that he was not being rude. He was actually being kind, right? But he was living the stereotype of older people being technophobic. And older people don't know tech. And that little incident opened up my eyes. And suddenly I'm looking around me and saying, oh my God, people are treating me differently just because I'm old. And here I am acknowledging that I am old, but saying I'm old, I'm not decrepit.
Yeah.
I am old, I'm not senile. I'm old, I'm not frail. And that's how started the journey of looking at the social narrative. Now, the problem with the social narrative, Malu, and you know this, I've lived my entire career in advertising and marketing. The social narrative starts getting internalized. And I remember 1979 when I started working. Okay. I was one of the first women in advertising at the management level. And at that time, you had this whole thing about women in the workplace. So we had to fight that entire gender bias, right? And today I'm seeing the same bias, social bias, when it comes to older people.
Yeah. It's one bias we have not addressed as much as we have the others. And, it's not just the work. If you honestly think about it, it starts with fairy tales and it starts with your textbooks, be it gender bias or ageism, they all start very young. And that's why the guy who told you were not tech savvy, he's learned it the easy path. I mean, that's the myth that everyone has, I guess, right? Yeah. So when you started focusing on the longevity space, At what point did you realize this wasn't an individual problem, but a massive societal blind spot?
Okay, that's actually the critical factor that needs attention. Okay, today, if we look at India, 225 million Indians are above the age of 55.
Mm.
Okay, that's a giant number, huge number. I was just looking at some global stats, and 30 plus of the world is over the age of 50. Now, in India, we have this a myth, not myth exactly, but we live with it's like a half fact that we are a young economy. Of course, we are a young economy because we have a lot of young people, but we have aging people. We are an aging economy, and the fact that we are an aging economy is very, very beautifully hidden because it's not acknowledged, right? Everybody talks about Japan being an aging economy, and everyone says, oh, Japan's an aging economy. But in India, the number of people we have makes any problem exponentially larger. And in this kind of a situation where you have an aging economy, we also have problems of the traditional support systems breaking down. Okay, if I look back at my parents, for instance, my mother had 7 siblings, my father had 12 siblings, right? I had 3 siblings, sorry, 2 siblings, there were 3 of us, and my daughter is a single child. So you can see the pyramid is narrowing down. Traditionally, what happened, the community, the larger family, the extended family, everybody looked after the seniors.
Yeah.
So elders were revered. They were looked after. Today, what is happening is elders are seen as a burden. They're seen as being unproductive. They're seen as being a cost center. Okay. And except for unpaid child care, which seems to be the only thing people want us for. And, I really think us grandparents need to get up in arms about unpaid childcare. We love our grandchildren, but if you want us to spend our life looking after them, you jolly well pay us for that, right? So, what is happening is seniors are being pushed into a corner. Now, one of the biggest problems is social relevance.
Mm.
So if we start internalizing the story of, oh, we are, frail, we are useless, we are past our sell by date, and now it's time for us to, go off into the Himalayas and pray day and night, that's not going to happen. It may happen with a very small group of people, but it's not going to happen to everybody. So typically, we need to be able to address this group. We need to be able to find solutions for this group. We need to be able to make this group realize that, look, Malu, if I live for another 30 years, right? I retire at 60. I live till 90. Do I have enough money for 30 years? Do I have enough desire to look after myself for 30 years? Do I have access to the implements? I mean, you look at, societies like Singapore, for instance, which are very often referred to as nanny states, where the state comes in and supports residents. In India, we don't have that. We have to look after ourselves. And that's how this whole journey began, saying, what can we do to make seniors? And by the way, we did huge amounts of research and we found people want control. They want agency. Anybody who's dealt with older people know, they want agency. They want control. They want to feel they're in charge. So how can we give them those tools, those implements? How can we make them realize that they are productive members of society?
Yeah, that's the constant discussion people have, saying that, you know, health is important, financial stability is important, but the purpose is something that people are missing out, thinking that after a certain age, it doesn't matter. All you need is a rocking chair. And we'll come to that later on in terms of why corporates and organizations are refusing to bring these people back into the workplace. Since you talking about India, just had one more question for you. It could be because of lack of awareness, but the conversations around aging is still very uncomfortable in Indian homes, right? Be it writing a will or moving parents over 80 to a senior home more for convenience than anything else. These are things that you cannot have a comfortable conversation with even today. Why is that? And has that changed over the last few years?
Well, to be honest, Malu, I'm doing my damnedest best to change that.
Mm.
Okay. There is a podcast I do called Raising Parents, and it's available on YouTube. If you go to Raising Parents Official, you will find these conversations there. These are conversations with 40-year-olds who are looking after aging parents. Now, the relationship between an adult child and an aging parent is a very, very complex relationship, right? You suddenly have a shift of power. And now the power is in the hands of the child, and the parent is now becoming the child. And particularly if you're in your 40s, then you're dealing with parents who may be in their 70s and 80s. So there is that whole complexity. Like you said, in India, there are a lot of things we sweep under the carpet.
Mm.
It's like parents believe that you're my child. I have made you, and therefore I control you, and therefore I tell you what needs to be done. I mean, that's so stupid, right? You may be responsible for giving birth to that individual. But again, imagine if you had somebody who caught onto your pallu as a 40-year-old adult. What a horrifying thought. But a lot of traditional moms believe that that is life, that, I looked after you, so you now put your entire life on hold and you look after me, which is silly. So we need to get these conversations out there. And with aging parents, what I'm saying is talk about these things, right? It's not that children don't neglect their parents. I've had conversations with people who didn't really understand the value of their parents, and then their parents passed away. And the hurt you feel when you lose a parent stays with you for your entire life. And it's like I asked one of my guests this question. So, when you lost your parents, and the first thing he said is, no, I haven't lost my parents. They passed away, but they are with me every single moment of every day. And that guilt also is with you, right? So that becomes very corrosive. So we need to have conversations. And you're so right in highlighting this, Malu, that in India, we don't have these conversations, and we need to.
Yeah, that's true. But if you look at it from a policy perspective, what urgently needs to change in India from a policy perspective?
I would say there are three things that if the government is able to do, and again, what's interesting is that before I get into the policy question, let me explain to you that this segment today is not being acknowledged as a important segment. This segment is seen as, yeah, okay, there's some amount of action taking place, and let's go and build some senior citizens' homes, right? And everybody's idea is, oh, senior housing, great business. So all the real estate companies are running into that. The government is saying, let's support senior housing. The fact of the matter is, what I call the silver economy is a fantastic economy.
Right.
Look at it objectively. We have the money. Okay. We are asset rich and liability light. Nobody in their right mind will give a 60-year-old a loan.
Yeah.
Okay. So we have to manage on our own resources, right? And this is a huge $1 trillion economy.
$22 trillion.
Which needs to be focused on.
Yeah.
Now, when it comes to policy, at one end, you have people like me who've done well for ourselves. We worked our entire life. We are independent. But every time I pay income tax on the interest I get on my fixed deposits, I literally feel like, exploding up in flames. I have paid tax my entire life. Now, this is not my earning. I'm not making any money anymore. I'm now living off my assets and my savings. So the first thing the government needs to do is to look at the tax regime when it comes to seniors. The second thing we need to do is to look at medicines. Today, for instance, most diabetes is such a common disease in India, right?
Yeah.
The South Asian ability to process sugar is documented as being non-existent. And then we sort of have too much sugar in any case. So now diseases, how do you control that? The government needs to take cognizance of this. I'll give you an example. Today, I did tests to make sure I'm big into therapeutic care. So I did tests to make sure everything's fine. My tests cost me a load of money, but I can't claim insurance. I can't claim them against insurance.
Mm.
I mean, that's so stupid, right? You're encouraging people to disregard their health because you're not making it easy for them. So the first is taxation, the two is things like healthcare,
Mm.
and the third is basically accident. I mean, you look at our roads, our cities are so senior unfriendly.
Yeah.
I think the government needs to have some amount of infrastructure where seniors can go in there, meet other seniors, because if we don't socialize, again, we lose that zest for living. So policy is very important. Now, we are a number of players in this space trying to get together and help move policy ahead. There have been organizations like HelpAge India, right, who's done absolutely incredible work over the years, but their focus is more the underprivileged.
Mm.
Their focus is more, the rural aging population. I'm saying that with greater urbanization, more and more people living longer, society needs to understand that this is not deadwood. This is a resource, but you have to learn how to use this resource.
I know. Yeah. I mean, they can contribute economically as well. As you said, it is not a cost center, it's more of a revenue center if you look at it, because they can pump into the economy as well. So, see, whatever you mentioned about India, when you look globally, some countries have already done quite a bit, and India can learn, from them. For example, if you look at Singapore, there's a lot of focus on health. So, there's subsidized medical programs, there's skilling for seniors, employment for seniors, and also when you talk about infrastructure, there's tons of things done, urban development. So one of the speakers had said that, one of the critical things about longevity is the connection that you have with people. That's very, very important and critical. So I was telling him about the joint family thing that we had in India, where, we had, as you rightly mentioned, we had hundreds of people living together and each of them supporting each other. Given the way things are, we love to ape the Westerners, so we did the same. We wanted nuclear families, and that's why we're struggling now, right? So if you look at Singapore again, from a housing perspective, you have these HDBs where you have all ages living together, but they ensure that things are, well taken care of for the seniors in terms of the stairs, in terms of everything else. So I think there are a few countries where we can learn from, but I guess we have a long way to go when we look at it holistically and globally, I guess.
Yeah, and the other interesting point you made, this thing about joint families, the breakup of joint families,
Yeah.
right?
Mm.
One of the reasons behind that is because of migration for work.
Mm.
Now, migration for work is not always migration abroad.
Correct.
It's migration within the country.
Mm.
And the country is so vast. So if somebody has left their hometown in Ranchi to go and work in Bangalore, and their old folk are left behind in Ranchi, how do they cope with it?
Yeah. Mm. That's true.
It's not easy. And a small town like Ranchi doesn't really have facilities.
Yeah. Mm. Yeah. So talking about migration, talking about working, let's touch upon the workplace as well, because one of the places where ageism becomes very visible is the workplace. And you know it better than anybody else. And this is happening at a time when people need to or want to work longer on one side, and on the other, the birth rates are going down. So, why do companies say they value experience but often hire the youth, even till today?
I don't think companies value experience. Okay, let's be very clear about that. that is all lip service. I think companies basically, and we as a society are to blame for this, Malu.
Yeah.
We have essentially stripped the company of its soul, and we have forced the company to just look at the bottom line, right? Now, even you and me as investors, just think about it. If we are invested in a stock in a company and if they had 3 quarters of non-performing, but their staff were very happy, they, aced the best places to work, would you continue to invest in that? No. You'd say, hey, your business is to make money. And so when companies reflect back what we demand of them, they are not interested in keeping older people. Why? Because older people are expensive. And so if you want to cut down on your costs, what do? You get rid of all the older people you had who are not expensive inherently, but have become expensive because of passage of time. And so what happens is organizations pay lip service to this. And today, in fact, the sad truth is I speak with so many CEOs and they are all acknowledging this in private, that they are losing the strategic advantage that they had for a commercial advantage, which actually is narrowing down the gap between them and their competitors. So if you're pushing a bottom line advantage, your ability to maintain that strategic, distinct character, culture, whatever you call it, that actually gave you that top line is missing. Now, the interesting thing is, as we get older, we actually get better. And this today is proven by AI, right? All your LLMs are being trained to be able to find those solutions. This LLM is a natural LLM. We get trained, we get neural pathways that actually help us find solutions very quickly. And this is what I find amazing. Today, my brain, honestly, is far better than it was when I was in my 40s. I mean, for me, problem solving, the ability to look 10 steps ahead, all of that comes naturally. Workers. So what I believe will happen in the future, and we really need to encourage this shift, make gig work acceptable among seniors.
Yeah.
So if I can do 5 hours in a week for a company, that in those 5 hours, I can contribute far more to that company than somebody sitting in there day in and day out. I can do it at a lower cost. So we need to find these solutions. But ultimately, I think, Malu, if society wants to grow, okay, in terms of the ability of people to feel that, homogeneity, synchronicity, you can't do that by eliminating one entire demographic.
Yeah. Interestingly, I'm working on a similar thing. I've set up a platform called Renew, which is about getting senior professionals back into the workforce. Again, it's fractional roles, gigs. And from a cost perspective, again, they're willing to go down. I mean, for them, it's more of a purpose, contributing. They have the experience, they know how it can be done. And also in terms of, you don't have attrition as much as you have with the youngsters because they're coming there for a purpose. So that is a wrong reason for companies to not take them back, saying that they're expensive. I think that's not true. And also if you look at it from the other side, I'm usually asked why I'm advocating for senior professionals heading back when the youngsters are not getting jobs. Most of the moms ask me this question, but the real opportunity is collaborative. Both of them have their purpose in an organization, right? I mean, it's an oversight, it's mentoring, they can both play their own roles. But that is what the awareness is lacking in most of these corporates. So when I go and talk to corporates about this platform that we have, as you said, they love the idea. They said, yeah, this is what it is. Most of the HRs love it, but they do not know how to pivot from a full-time job to a gig at a senior level. So they're still struggling with it. And it's not an easy place to be in. Yeah. So have you come across any organization where the intergenerational workplace has been successfully implemented in India?
No,
Not yet.
not at all. Not at all. I mean, there's been attempts at trying to get things going, looking at, sort of intergenerational partnerships on projects. I remember a company that I worked with who was trying very hard to, get this to sort of get the pieces to fit, but it didn't work.
Oh, no.
And I'm one of those big believers in the fact that, look, I can say this, and people, even if they get offended, they have to accept it. Older people are damn difficult to deal with. Okay? They are opinionated. They come in there saying, this is not the way it was done. This is not the way we have done it. Right? And I would say, with all humility, that more than 60% of my age group are like that. And so it becomes very difficult to, adjust when it comes to younger people. And for a younger person, the older person constantly running them down and saying, oh, you don't know, we did this, this is how it worked, blah, 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 becomes very intimidating. And that is one of the reasons. And it's a very natural progression. I mean, come on, tell me one 17-year-old who's as close to his grandma when he was 17 as he was when he was 7. Right? I mean, husband and wife outgrow each other in a marriage. So why do we find it strange to accept that, you have to fit together? This intergenerational thing is brilliant. I'm sorry, it's not. Older people have difficulties in the way they react to the world around them. It's like a child. If a child starts, messing in his diaper, you're not going to say, oh, he has no control. Right? That's the stage at which he is. So you accept that stage. I'm saying, as older people, accept the fact that we have our biases. We have a weirdness, but that doesn't mean we are unproductive.
Yeah, it's true.
It just means that we flourish in certain circumstances and we don't flourish in others.
But you don't have a choice. I mean, it has to be intergenerational. Now you have 5 generations working together in the workforce. So people need to adapt, change their ways of working. And
Yeah,
on.
yeah. And that's why I said, look, there are some people who are very easily adaptable, regardless of the age they are.
Yeah, true.
And there are others who are not adaptable, even when they are younger. So what we end up calling out as an age-related problem is not an age-related problem necessarily.
It could be how a person is wired, you're saying.
Yeah.
So I'm going to flip it and look at the positive. So what do older professionals sometimes misunderstand about the younger generation?
So the older professionals very often use their own filter to evaluate younger people, right? I'll give you a silly example, but a wonderful example. So we had this L&T CEO head who made this comment about, why would we, how long will you sit at home and look at your wife's face, right? Now, the fact of the matter is, for him, it was a normal thing to want to work on Sunday. Narayana Murthy has also said that Indians need to be willing to do 70-hour weeks, right? But for a younger person today, they don't have the same compulsions that the older person had. See, my generation grew up not having, in a very insular, very contained, very limited world. We were the generation who were post-independence. We were still working within a socialist kind of state, right? Liberalization happened in 92. For us, the ability to buy a brand was so strange. I mean, I remember family coming back from Dubai with oil of Olay and Kraft cheese. I mean, can you think of people actually bringing Kraft cheese today? No, you can't. You walk out into the store and you get maybe 30 varieties of cheese. So as a result of which, what happens is the entire wiring is different. Kids today have grown up with much more than we did. Our motto, our parents would always say, you need to work, you need to buy a house. Okay, so we worked, we bought a house. Our kids don't need to buy a house. They have our houses. Plus, families are shrinking. So many of us have one child, right? And then that child knows, okay, I get my parents' house when my parents are not there anymore. So I don't really need to work hard to buy a house. So you understand it's such a complex thing. And we all think, okay, we love buzzwords and buzz phrases, intergenerational collaboration. Yeah, but it's a different direction that they want to go in. You can't force fit stuff. I think for every generation, it's important to understand that we all need each other to survive.
Yes.
Right? And if we collaborate, we thrive. So, how to make that desire to thrive preeminent so that collaboration becomes inbuilt?
Hmm. So, what do younger professionals underestimate about their older colleagues?
So, I find a lot of younger professionals, for instance, have a huge problem with the attitude of older colleagues. Okay. And oh, you're not working 8 hours, 10 hours, 12 hours, we work 12 hours. So then it means that you're incompetent. But the younger colleague actually is probably today has the tools that allows him or her to deliver output. Okay. That would have maybe earlier taken 14 hours of work. And I've seen this because I mean my last company was a media auditing and consulting company, right?
Yes.
And I started when technology was not so widespread, and I sold it by the time technology had become really the mainstay. And so seniors within the company who would probably spend 4 days to do an assignment were being like a little irritated when the young kid would do the same assignment in 3 hours. Not because they were smarter, but they had a different set of tools to use.
Okay. The question is, what do younger professionals underestimate about the older colleagues? Something positive about the older colleagues, please.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, there's so much. See, the problem solving that the older colleagues have, okay, the ability to look at strategic calls, right? You may think it's tactical, but it's not tactical, it's strategic. And the ability to understand how the smaller bits and pieces fit together.
Connecting the dots. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
That's something that older people have because it comes from couple of things. One is it comes from completely different backgrounds when they started out working. So the skill sets they needed were different.
Mm.
And two, it comes from so many years of, experimentation, making the mistakes. Like one of my favorite lines is, don't make the mistakes I made.
Mm.
Make new mistakes. So I'll tell you all about the mistakes I made. I'll help you prevent making those mistakes. And then you go out and make new mistakes. That's how we all learn.
I cannot not talk about women when I'm talking to you. So let's just touch upon women and aging because I think the experience is completely different. Society often allows men to work or age into authority, but women are expected to age quietly, right?
Yeah.
Does visibility reduce for women as they grow older?
This is such a weird question, Malu,
Mm.
because when I joined advertising in 79, right, there were no women around. And I spent the first 20 years of my career actually helping women, building a platform for women, giving women a voice. It got to a stage where in the industry, if there was, discrimination or there was, sexual harassment, people would actually call me, reach out to me, and the number of problems I have solved from behind the scenes without making a fuss about it. But at that time, the funny thing was everybody realized there was a problem.
Mm.
Okay. And this is where I think the problem with the situation we are in today is people don't realize there's a problem. So when it comes to ageism, yes, ageism in some ways is gender neutral. Okay, I would say that ageism is far more gender neutral than many of the other isms that we have in our world. But having said that, it is easier for men to cope with it than for women. And let me explain why. Because men always have a professional, most men have a professional persona that they can hide behind, right? A lot of women don't have that. And I find that women who have a professional persona actually age much better than women who've not been working women. So you find the older teacher, for instance, or the older bank manager, or the older executive, female executive, are aging much better than the housewife. And the biggest problem is the root of this is relevance. If you are relevant, you feel your existence can be justified. But if you're not relevant, your existence, your very existence becomes a question. And for a lot of housewives, when the kids have grown up, the husband has his own interests, they've lost relevance.
If I were to flip it, I think it's the other way around. As they age, I'm talking about when people reach a certain age. If you look at men,
Sure.
their whole entire life is around that little business card. The identity is the business, not just men. I mean, most people who are working, the day they've been asked to go, thanks to the word retirement, if they're asked to step down, they lose their identity. And when you look at women, they have this tendency of having these friend groups, keeping in touch with people and having some side gigs, even as they're working, something that will take them along in the long run. The other thing is men do not share any of these feelings. They are miserable. They are depressed when they lose their identity, and their social circle also shrinks. For them, the social circle is the people in the office. You call them the proximity friends who also disappear over a period of time. So let's have a drink. Probably will go away after 6 months after you've retired. So they struggle a lot more compared to women. But having said that, from a societal perspective, there's still a gap in terms of how.
Yeah. So you've raised a very interesting differentiation between men and women. Okay. Women are far more supportive of each other in the sense that women have friends, right? All of us women have our soul sisters. We have our friends. We have those people we can go to when we have a problem.
Yeah.
Men don't make friends that easily. And that is a genetic, they're hardwired like that. There are very few men who have these deep, long term friendships. They have a lot of acquaintances. Right. So there is that complexity, no doubt about it. But having said that, our entire society supports a retired man much more than it supports a unemployed older woman. Let's put it that way. Okay. So if you look at inner strength, I mean, come on. I believe women are incredibly strong.
Yes.
They're far stronger than most men, right? They're genetically stronger, biologically stronger, socially
Emotionally.
stronger. Whichever way you look at it, they're stronger. But society props up men much more than it props up women. And that's really the distinction. And because society props up retired men much more, I mean, I'll give you an example, right? Analogy. Go to any park. You'll find lots of men in the park. The male population, I'm talking of retirees, seniors. The male senior population in the park will be far greater than the female senior population in the park, despite the known fact that women outlive men.
Women are either doing Zumba or they're in the gym, probably.
Whatever. The fact of the matter is, in public places, the congregation is still driven by males.
Fair enough.
Because society props them up. It's wonderful, I mean, to talk about this is such a complex problem.
It
And
is.
many, many years ago, when I did my graduation, I studied sociology. And, my mother once asked me, do you think this is really going to be of use to you? And today, like, mom's been dead for 22 years, but mom, it is working every single day.
Since you come
Dear.
from the media world, there's another discrimination that I notice. I wanted to understand your perspective. Why are women constantly pressured to look younger?
Aha.
Hmm.
Aha. Why are women constantly pressured to look younger? Why are women told that age spots are ugly? Why are women told gray hair is not good? I mean, look at this. This is gorgeous gray hair. Why would I want to color it? But again, it's the narrative, it's
Hmm.
marketing. The more you market, the more you say this is ugly, the sense of beauty. I mean, look at Fair and Lovely, right? An entire brand, fortune built on a social narrative. Now, of course, it's a chicken and an egg situation. Was a brand there because people wanted it, or did people want it because a brand was offered to them? So I think, and there is this other problem, Malu, that people say, oh, 60 is the new 40.
Hmm.
I feel like slapping people who say 60 is the new 40, you know?
Yeah, the other thing is, oh, you look so young for your age. He's like, what am I
Yeah,
supposed to
what
look
do
like?
you want me to look like an old hag? I will look like an old hag when I'm 90 years old, and so live with it. I think a lot of this image about, how you should look, how you should dress, what you should do is all marketing. Yeah, and if you're stupid enough to think that a company is interested in our well-being, I mean, come on, give me a break. Even a company like Unilever, who
Yes.
keeps talking about, how socially conscious they are. I mean, come on, it's all greenwashing. It's all social inaptitude that you're encouraging by doing stuff like that. No, please, let's be very clear. The human body comes in many different shapes, sizes, colors, features, everything. At the end of the day, we want everybody should feel I am beautiful. I'm beautiful the way I am because I'm unique. There's nobody else who's like me. You're unique. I'm unique. And we're absolutely gorgeous. And we keep getting better and better and better as we age. And you know why? Because we are less dependent on what somebody else thinks about us. When we are younger, we are far more vulnerable to external pressure. When we are younger, we are far more vulnerable to uniform social code. But as we get older, okay, we give a rat's ass. And that's really one of the biggest advantages of getting old, fitting into your skin and saying, you know what, world, I love you, but I give a rat's ass about what people think.
Is there any other advice you would give women entering this phase of life?
Oh, yeah. I would say couple of things, okay? Number one, have your girlfriends, your soul sisters, and get them to be honest with you. Sometimes as friends, we are not honest with each other because, we try and say what we think you want to hear instead of what you need to hear. So one is encourage honesty among your sisters because that is incredible. The second thing, be financially independent. You must keep your own money. You must have access to your funds. You must be able to ensure that you have money to do the things you want to do. And the third thing is make time for yourself. Make the time. Follow a passion, follow a hobby, make new friends,
Yes.
get new skills. That's critical.
So let's go to one of your favorite topics. Tell us a bit more about the Gen S life, because what you're building feels far bigger than a platform for seniors. What was the gap that you identified? How did it all start?
So, women and men, okay, as they get older, what are the things that they really want? They want to have control of their life, and they want to have access to the services that they need without having to go around asking people. Let's say, for instance, I have a fall, I need home care while I'm recovering. Now, when if I have a fall, I have a couple of options. Option one is to call my daughter and say, "Hey, I've got a problem. Can you give up everything and come and look after me?" Or, "I've had a fall. I'm now coming over to your place." Right? Or the better option is go to a known verified source. I need home care. It's available. I need somebody to take me to hospital for tests. They are available. I need somebody to come and make sure my house is secure. That's available. So the whole idea behind Gen S Life was to put together an entire ecosystem that supports us as we age, gives us access to everything that we need. You know, Malu, something as simple as an ambulance in India
Mhm.
is so complex. I mean, try calling an ambulance, you're never sure that it's going to get there while you're still alive, right? So, we have tied up with an ambulance service. That's a national ambulance service called Red Health. One number nationally, and in 500 cities, you get an ambulance at your door. So earlier I talked about parents in Ranchi, child working in Bangalore, right? Now, if parents are in Ranchi, how can you get access to services for them in Ranchi? So the whole idea behind Gen S Life was knitting together. You know, we do this constantly in a very disorganized manner. Like, let's say you got a problem, you need some support, you'll call three people and say, "Hey, I've got a problem, can you help me out?" Right?
Yeah.
But why do you have to call those three people? Here is an app that is available that provides a national service. And again, we priced it very, very low, 990 rupees a year. It's a no brainer. $1,000 for peace of mind
Mm.
is nothing. And then what we did is all these services we added on, we negotiated discounts. We have 40 partners online, 40 of the best companies in the country with service linked agreements with all of these 40 people that gives you a guarantee of the kind of service you will get. Now, one is building an ecosystem of support and services. Two is giving people access to a community.
Mm.
So, if, for instance, I have a community online, I have people I can talk to, I have people I can meet every day, that transforms my life. So, we have live events every single day, from yoga in the morning to karaoke to dancing to singing, you know, book clubs, everything on the app so that you're able to have access to it and you're able to transform your life. The minute you remove dependency and you support independence, that itself is half the battle won.
Mm. What surprised you the most after entering the space?
What surprised me the most after entering the space is how much lip service we pay to issues, right? And like I'm saying this to every 35 and 40-year-old who's out there. You know, you talk about your parents, you get emotional, but you don't do enough for them.
Yeah.
And the thing is, you don't need to actually put your life on hold. You just need to find those few little things that can actually help your parents transform their lives. Make it as simple or as complex as you want it to be. I have a very simplistic view of the world. You're either part of the problem or you're part of the solution. If you want to be part of the solution, then you have to do something.
It's true.
You can't just sit and talk and say, "Oh, I'm very worried about my parents," and not take those few steps that ensure they have an independent life.
I think conversations like this remind us that aging is not just about medical conversation. It's about economic
Yeah.
workforce, gender conversation, policy, and deeply a human conversation at the end of it. So tell me, if you could change just one thing about the way society thinks about aging today, what would it be? One.
Just one?
Yeah.
I would get every marketer in the world to start chasing this demographic. If I could change only one thing,
Yeah.
because the cascading impact of that one change would be amazing.
Thank you so much. That was a rich and energizing conversation. I guess any conversation with you is the same. So it's like, it was fantastic. So I think the biggest takeaway or the goal is to remain engaged, curious, useful, and connected, and fully alive at every stage of life. That is my takeaway from you. And thank you so much for your time, Meenakshi.
Thank you, Malu. And I think you've summed it up beautifully. Staying fully alive at every stage of your life.